This is Radio Cairo, and this is the World of Info. We are coming from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr MABROuk. Dua Muhammad is at the control, and today in the World of Info, we're going to present the world of books. And yes, in the world of books, we usually present 2 to 3 books or sometimes 4 books, but today we are presenting only one book. One book which is really, in spite of the fact that it's a real short book, yet it's quite important. And I have decided to give the whole episode about it because the book is written by a very famous historian. His name is David McCullough, and he's an American, of course, and the book name is History Matters. And the book is being produced posthumously. David McCullough was born in 1933, the son of an owner of an electrical supply company in Pittsburgh. He's the third of 4 boys who grew up in a largely vanished world. His childhood was spent in comfort, and he attended private high school and graduated from Yale in 1955. He worked as a writer and editor at Time Incorporation, and then went to Washington to be part of the New Frontier, taking a job with the United States Information Agency under the CBS legend Edward Murrow. Standing with Rosalie outside his office, recounting the story of his job interview, he would always say he had an interview, and Rosalie is his wife, and the interview was, do you know anything about the Arabs? And he said, no, I don't. So he said, he was told that you're going to start learning. And he has produced a journal that is specifically directed towards Arab. His interest in history is very amazing. He was able to produce a lot of books, and this is why I decided to give you an idea about the book, about David McCullough. He was born in 1933, as I said, and died in 2022. So he almost lived 90 years. During these 90 years, he produced a lot of books that were bestsellers. During his career, he twice received the Pulitzer Prize for Truman and John Adams, and twice received a National Book Award for The Pass Between the Seas and Mornings on a Horseback. His other acclaimed books included The Jonestown Flood, his first book, The Great Bridge, his second book, Brave Companions, 1776, The Greater Journey, The American Spirit, The Wright Brothers, and The Pioneers. He was the recipient of numerous honors and awards, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the nation's highest civilian award. So all these credentials and even a lot of honorary degrees or PhDs definitely deserves that this man is given the tribute about his books. And the book that we are talking about today was written by his daughter. She worked with him for nearly 3 decades. She's the author of 3 previous books. And Michael Hill, co-author with her, he was an independent historical researcher who worked with David McCullough for more than 30 years, and he's also the author of 3 previous books. So why do we give a lot of credit to David McCullough? Well, we have to, first of all, to identify how he has written these books. Perhaps one of the famous books how he started writing was the Jonestown Flood, and he personalized the story. He wrote the history of this dreadful flood that happened, and at the same time he tried to give idea to the readers of the personal point of view of the people who suffered, and tell them the stories, because he said that the history should be in flesh and blood, not just a real boring way of writing the events. So the second book was The Pass Between the Seas, about Panama Canal and how it was built, and this also he tried to personalize it. His books became, from the very beginning, very best sellers, and definitely in order to introduce the David McCullough to the author, to the readers, this book has given us the idea of how we should approach him and understand really how it all started. And the book, which was written by his daughter and the co-author, started by saying that definitely history is the extension of life. It both enlarges and intensifies the experience of being alive. It's like poetry and art or music, and it's ours to enjoy. If we deny our children that enjoyment, that adventure in the larger time among the greater part of the human experience, we're cheating them out of a full life. This is what David McCullough said. He had a passion, and he believed that he had a mission to accomplish, which is spread the news about history, tell the people about stories, make history a lovable subject for them, make them see the flesh and blood and the people behind the stories, and make friendship with these stories, and always believe that it is the most important thing is to make history come alive. Tell stories. The pull, the appeal is irresistible, because history is about two of the greatest of all mysteries, time and human nature. So he was talking about himself in this small paraphrasing of what he said. He said, how lucky we are. How lucky we are to enjoy in our work and in our lives the possibilities, the precision and reach, the glories of the English language. How lucky we are, how very lucky we are to live in this great country as America. So when we talk about how he looked at the idea, because he was so much concerned with the history of America and trying to make it come to life. And this what makes this book special, and this what makes David McCullough very special. In another prose he has written, he said that what draws us to history is the pull of the past, is change. It is what is new, not what is old. And change is the essence of life. What we are really interested in is what we are care about, is life, people, and what happened to them, and why, and what changed, and what was new. So when you tell a historical story, definitely the beginning of the story is different than the end, because a change happened, and so you are describing an incident, an event that happened that made the people before at the beginning of this story are different totally than the same people at the end of the story. So what was the change that has driven them? How these human beings changed? And so we are describing the effect of history on people and on time. So this is how he has decided to try to emphasize the role of history. So he sees history through the change and through the effects of change. And that's why one of the industrial or the great, magnificent technical miracles that happened was building the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And for this, he dedicated a book, and he has written a book about this bridge. And people who tried to tell him, what are you going to write about the bridge? And what do you think that this bridge will concern the people to understand how it was built and how the structure was designed? This might not be interesting. But he has written saying that in order to, although it looks very magnificent, but we have to look at this bridge at the period it was built, and this shows how great it was. Because it was built when Franklin Roosevelt was in his first term. It was built in the era of Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. It was built at the time of Berlin Olympics, built at the time of the abdication of King of England for the woman I love, built during the Great Depression, and built during a period when two of the most important events of the 20th century took place, foretelling everything that has so changed in our world. Two events that took place not much more than 100 miles apart. One in Copenhagen, where Niels Bohr and his colleagues, the famous chemist at the Institute for Theoretical Physics, determined that if the uranium atom were split, it would release a power beyond any previous understanding or example. And just across the way, at a small German fishing village, the Nazi government had instituted the first rocket experimental station under the young, brilliant physicist von Braun. So in that period, when this magnificent bridge was going up, we have the beginnings of nuclear age and the rocket century. So history is connected. And the things that are happening in the United States, there are also important things that are happening in Europe and in other states. So how history is connected and how you look at all these events and try to connect them and to connect the dots, this is what makes this history really matter. And this is the title of the book. So you're still listening to the World of Info. Stay tuned to us, because after the break we have... So still listening to the World of Info, and today is the World of Books, and today we are presenting History Matters about David McCullough, the famous historian and author who passed away in 2022, and his daughter and a co-author of hers have decided to write this book, taken from his essays that he left behind and his commencement speeches that he was asked to give. And this would show you the experience of a historian with his advice about history, claiming in the end that definitely history matters. One of his very interesting commencement speeches was about luck. And he said that we always wish in our lucky stars, and we really don't understand where really does luck present, or is it just the efficiency that will lead you the way? They once asked Niels Bohr, who was quite a famous chemist and one of the first pioneers in the field of nuclear physics, and he said, you have a horseshoe nailed on the top of the door. And he had it on his door, and he was asked once by a skeptical colleague whether he believed in such nonsense. He said, no, I don't, but I'm told that it works even if you don't believe in it. We take the luck to heart, and we should, because luck, good luck and bad luck, play an important and immensely important part in life, and so it does in history, primarily because history is human. And yes, this is really very interesting, because history is itself, as he said, is not just politics and the military. It's, among other things, industry, arts, science, business, medicine, failure, money, and love. He was also interested in another element of history, which is luck, and what role did luck play in people's life. He liked the quote Winston Churchill, who, when praised for his courage, famously said that his nation had the lion's heart, and he had the luck to be called upon to give the roar. So he was not claiming that he was lucky, but definitely the luck was that he was present at that same time. And he is emphasizing, McCullough, in his speeches, how the luck has transformed things. And of course, the famous story, because he has written a book about Washington, and how that Washington decided in a moment of full of luck in the final days of August in 1776 to withdraw all his army through crossing the river in the evening and trying to get away from a trap that was made by the Brits, who were outnumbering them. And it was the lucky chance is that when they started their sail across the river, that there has been a fog that prevented the British from chasing them or from knowing even that they have left. And that's why they came back again for war later, for a battle again, and they won. So it was the turn of luck. And so this is part of the luck that we can talk about forever. And of course, because he has written a book about the Wright brothers, he said that one of them that is was very much interested in reading, and he has read a lot of books, and he wanted to understand the feeling of writing, and he has written a book about the German glider enthusiast, that is Otto Linhard, which led to numerous books on birds. And one of these stressed the way of an eagle in the air must remain a mystery until the structure and use of wings were understood. So this made him very much, the stroke of luck of reading this made the Wright brothers interested in flying and built the first flyable plane in history. And this was a stroke of luck. This luck comes to the people who are well prepared to take the chance, if we may use this expression. And therefore, it is very important to understand how really luck matters in your life and how you be prepared for the stroke of luck. When it comes to you, you are prepared for it. And of course, the second thing, when he was asked about how should we write, and he said one of the famous professors taught him that you should always look and see in the facts. You should take time in seeing, and that's why the eyes are very important in preparing yourself for the task ahead. He would give them a fish, and for example, and say to them, look at your fish, see what you can talk about the fish in, and write an essay about it. So the ordeal with the fish is that you use your eyes to see things before you write down what you want. So this is important. And once he said, one of his mottos, he said, when a famous writer or an author was asked, why do you write books? He said, I write books because I want to write something that I myself would be interested in reading. And of course, the self-critique of a human being or a writer in writing a book definitely would say, write the book you wanted to read or you want to read. So when asked about, do you live with your books? He said, of course. Working on a book is what really makes me live in the book and in the subject and in the time and in the place. Whenever I go away for a couple of days, I have to work to put myself back in it, to get back under the spell of the book. And so this is really very interesting of how you can understand factors which makes you really interested to write books. And he didn't, or all through his life, was never able to write anything except about a topic that he loves. For example, when he was asked to write a book about Picasso, he didn't like Picasso much. He didn't like his life. He didn't like his attitude with women. He didn't like his story on a whole. And after some studying of his life, he decided that he's not going to write this book. When he has written a book about Theodore Roosevelt, and this was a great success. So his editors came to him, the publishing house came to him and said, why don't you write a book about the second Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt? You know, of course, that Theodore or Teddy Roosevelt was the fifth cousin of Franklin Roosevelt. And Franklin Roosevelt already was married to the niece of Theodore Roosevelt. So he's from the family. He said one Roosevelt is enough. Although, of course, the number of people who have written about Franklin Roosevelt is huge, and he could have made a beautiful book about him. But he decided to go to another completely different character, and that is the character and the life of Harry Truman. And why did he choose Harry Truman, and why did he decide to dedicate a long period of his life to produce such a book, almost years? That's what we're going to talk about after the break. So you're still listening to Radio Cairo, and this is World of Info. And today is the World of Books, and the book is History Matters, about David McCullough, the famous historian. And one of the greatest biographies and books that he has written and received for it a Pulitzer Prize as well was the biography about Harry Truman. He worked on this book for a solid 10 years. It's a biography of 996 pages with 2,986 source notes. He often said, had he known at the outset how much archival material there was at the Truman Library, he wouldn't have had the courage to begin. Then quickly he would add how grateful he was for not knowing. So he has written a real introduction about the book in a very famous article that he has written. And he said that it was a stroke of luck. that Truman was picked to be the vice president of Franklin Roosevelt in the last election that Franklin Roosevelt went in. Everybody knew that Franklin Roosevelt's health is so bad and that he will definitely die during this fourth time that he's going to become the president. And so the choice which went to the leaders of the Democratic Party were to omit the vice president that was the previous vice president, and they have decided to pick Truman. And Truman was everything different than Roosevelt. The man Roosevelt was, of course, charismatic, while Truman was not like that, not glamorous, not photogenic. And when he took the office after the death of Franklin Roosevelt, he would feel the long shadow of Roosevelt, the most colossal figure in the White House in this century. He had none of Roosevelt's gifts. He had no beautiful speaking voice, no inherited wealth or social standing, no connections. He's the only president of the 20th century who never went to college, and along with his clipped Missouri twang and eyeglasses thick at the bottom of a Coke bottle, he had a Middle Western plainness of a manner that at first glance made him seem very ordinary. So everybody thought of him as an ordinary man, a man who didn't have a proper education, and at the same time a man who was able to find his way to become a senator in the Senate. How was that possible? He was an avid reader. He had persistence and perseverance, and he was very highly motivated. And for him, there were a lot of decisions that were taken and were made. Some of them were great, successful decisions. Others were bad decisions. And perhaps one of the most important decisions that he has taken up in his presidency was the decision to throw the atomic bomb on Japan. Everybody is always claiming that Truman has made this decision to throw 2 atomic bombs in Japan. It's really immoral. But he thought in a different way. He thought that on the trip for the American army to reach and to make the Japanese empire submit and accept surrender, they have to attack every group of islands until they reach the main shore of Japan. In Okinawa, the number of losses were in hundreds, in thousands of injured and deceased soldiers. So it made him think that how many Japanese would have to die in order to end the war, and how many Americans they would lose. At the end of the war, there were always like carpet bombing of cities in Japan, which went on with huge number of American bombers, and usually in any air raid there will be maybe 50 to 60,000 casualties with a big inferno of fire. So when he asked the nuclear physicists about how much will be the casualties of the nuclear bomb, and the physicists responded saying that it could be 20 to 30,000, which already is the number that Japan is bleeding every day in any carpet bombing air raid. And so he thought that if this happens from one plane and from one bomb, it will be, media speaking wise, great insult to the morals and a huge decline of the morals of the Japanese, and they will ask for surrender. So he gave up his decision and has written the order, and he went to sleep. Everybody was blaming him. How did he go to sleep? Well, actually, at that time, he was a real introvert person. He was not like Roosevelt. So he went to sleep with all the bad ideas and bad imagination in his mind, but
he didn't tell the story, he didn't tell anyone. So everybody later on would say how bold he was, how unsympathetic he was with the decision that he made. But a lot of historians now are referring to him that this was a bold and a good decision. In the defeat of the elections that happened in the Senate later, in the elections that happened later on, he in the beginning was claiming to finish the presidency of Roosevelt and retire. But the loss of votes that he has encountered in the Democratic Party, and how many people, means senators and congressmen from the Democratic Party lost in the half-term elections, put him on a different stroke of luck. He decided that he's going to put a show, that he's going to defend his position, and that he's going after success. And this was very strange, because in the number of critiques that would say that the chances that Truman would win is zero for in any elections, coming elections. Until the night of the elections, it was thought that Dewey is going to win and Truman will lose, but the contrast happened. People started thinking of him or admiring his behavior, especially, for example, in the Berlin siege, when he decided that he's going to arrange airlift and airdrops of food and necessary medical supply to Berlin, which was put under siege during the early days of the Cold War by the Soviets. And of course, this has given him a great admiration. One of the decisions that he really regretted was the release of the American troops from the draft, and allowing the soldiers, all the soldiers, to go back home, and therefore suddenly the fighting force of the American army has decreased, except for the presence of the atomic bomb. And that's why in 1950, when he was involved in the Korean War, he found out that he really needs to undergo rapid drafting of the American army again and to fight in the Korean War, which he thought of that. One of the mistakes that he has done was, of course, the loyalty bill, which allowed people like McCarthy to search in the conscience and the conscience of people, especially the famous artists and the famous actors and the famous writers and politicians, to search if they have really communist behavior like. And of course, this led to huge losses of brain drain and loss of a lot of people who were definitely important people in the history of America, and people who were forced to leave America, like, for example, Charlie Chaplin, from these accusations. Another point that is giving tribute to Truman was the fact that he started to search for giving civil rights to the African Americans many years before Martin Luther King had his famous speech of "I Have a Dream" and all this stuff, meaning that he was really sensing that and caring that all the Americans should be equal, and that the civil rights given to the African Americans should be given and should be taken, not taken for granted for everyone in the United States to be equal. So this is one of the good things that he did. So the work that, the mammoth work that was done by David McCullough in writing this huge biography is really interesting. And how to read 1,000 pages about Harry Truman is a task that I prefer, I would like to take, although I think it's going to be a very difficult task. But knowing the prose and the kind of prose that David McCullough writes, definitely this book could be really interesting. So stay tuned, we're coming after the break. So we're still listening to the World of Info and the World of Books, and today is the book about David McCullough, the famous historian, and History Matters. And perhaps one of the great things that David McCullough has done during his life was writing a book about George Washington.
And he has given, after this book, thousands of speeches over the course of his career, and the vast majority was a conversation about George, which he delivered without notes, each tailored to the specific audience before him. He always preferred a microphone, because a lavalier microphone, because it gave him the freedom to walk about the stage. Walking helped him to think, he believed, and it also allowed the audience to know he was speaking from his mind. Working without a transcription and was really definitely very interesting. And he thought, always he came to believe, that George Washington was the greatest American ever. Why is that? He said, for example, George Washington was have been born in 1732. He died at the age of 67 in 1799, 200 years ago. This was the speech that he made in 1999. The capital city of the United States was named for him. So were 121 other cities and towns across the country. There's a state, 7 mountains, 10 lakes, 32 counties, and 9 colleges named for George Washington. And of course, there is the George Washington Monument, which is the greatest public work of abstract sculpture. And there is the greatest in his equestrian statue in America, which is the equestrian figure of George Washington by the brilliant sculptor. And also, it stands in the opening of the public garden in Boston. Washington has been on the money since the money was first printed, and his visage, his face, appears on no less than 300 different postage stamps in more than 50 nations, where definitely has really affected the life of the Americans and the history of the world. And he is always being claimed that he is the first in war, the first in peace, and definitely the first in the hearts of his people. So when you talk about George Washington, we definitely give the tribute to David McCullough in explaining how George Washington was out of this world, because not only he won in war, but definitely he won the peace, and at the same time the idea that he decided that he is going not to ask for another term, that there is no place for kings in the United States, and this is what made him very special. They say, the people who lived with him said that he is polite with dignity, affable without familiarity, distant without haughtiness, and grave with authority, modest, wise, and good. He was a good human being. This is the characters that fitted him. How he was able to deal with people, how he was able to rule people, and at the same time direct him to the good of the people. Definitely, this is important. He was not the most highly educated of the leaders of the revolution, but he was definitely the wisest of them, and that's what makes him special. He was having terrible teeth aches, and yet he was able to survive and fight all the pains, definitely, that he has passed. So for him, he was a true great American, a figure of the world of importance. So when he has written this book about George Washington and attributing him to be the greatest ever American who lived, this is something that we should read and should understand about David McCullough. David McCullough has tried to emphasize the role of how to write. And he said, any writer must see with the painter's eye, has an ear for the music of words, has the actor's gift for mimicking and the capacity to take any part in whatever he is writing. And this is the most important thing in writing. And he said also a very famous motto that say, courage with intelligence is the best of all. So when we talk about David McCullough and his choice of trying to educate people how to write and how to see for themselves, he said that a writer should be a painter, and the writer should enjoy music, and the writer should understand and try to convey the message. The writer should be able to tell stories, because telling the stories is what matters. So the love of learning is continuous. So he really cherished his time in the school and in Yale University, and always said that although he majored in English, not history, but he also studied painting and art, and enjoyed his time to use what he learned in writing, and use the art of painting in writing. An interesting life. So we'll talk more about this book after the break. So you're listening to the World of Info, and today is the World of Books, and we're talking about History Matters, about David McCullough, the famous historian. One of the very famous, beautiful articles that he has written was about his experience with the Kennedy tenor. And he said that for him in 1960, at the peak of the election competition between John Kennedy and Nixon, he was amazed with the character of John Kennedy. And he believed that John Kennedy is a man who deserves to become a president of the United States. And therefore, he looked at him and he thought, at that time he was young, 27 years old, graduate from Yale, and working in Times and in the Time magazine. And he thought that I need to deliver a message to John Kennedy. But how can I reach him when I don't know anyone who knows him? And so they told him that Schlesinger is a very important character, and working in Harvard, and he's a very important character that will deliver any message to John Kennedy. And so he told him that I have an important. He sent him a message, and he said, and he called him on the telephone, and he said, I want to deliver a message that will help John Kennedy in winning the elections. And I think that this message deserved to reach him. He thought of himself that he was really naive to do that, and therefore Schlesinger, or the one who has written 1,000 Days in the White House, that is the days of Kennedy in the White House before the assassination. So he went. He said, "Okay, come and visit me in my house in my office in Harvard on the following day." And then he went to him and told him about his idea. So he met him at his office. He came a bit late, Schlesinger, but he told me, shoot. Told him, shoot, what do you want? He said that there's a big difference between Nixon and Kennedy. Nixon goes whichever way he thinks the wind's blowing. He has no character and no convictions. He is appealing to all the worst instincts in the people. He's an unconscious sermons based on fear. Don't rock the boat. Don't make the waves. Hold her steady as she goes, or all manners of horrors will fall upon us. While Kennedy, on the other hand, is saying, let's get going again. He's appealing to our best instincts. He's a call for courage, and this was what I felt had to be said, and said hard. So his courage was the courage of his convictions, and he said this and more. And he said this with so enthusiasm, so that Schlesinger said to him, all right, write a speech, and I will deliver to Kennedy, and we'll see what will happen. And so he left and kept writing for 2 days, and then sent this speech to Schlesinger, and he was amazed that he sent him another letter later on with the editorials that he made a lot of editing to the speech, but he kept the motto of the courage, and he waited for many weeks after that, waiting for Kennedy to say his speech. And really this happened in the end. Just on the night of the elections, he found Kennedy mentioning these words, and it was a sentence or two in the whole speech, but it was quite shown that this was his idea. So for him, this is a great success. For him, this has changed his life, because he decided to leave the time and accept an offer to work with the information service of the United States, of the Foreign Service, and to find a place to help the people and propagate the nationalism of the United States. So this shows how, first of all, a man who has, in spite of fact being young, but he has taken the chance and the initiative to go after a dream of reaching a gentleman who is trying very hard to become a president, and this man would listen to a youngster who has an idea. Of course, the idea was brilliant, but the fact that it was not nullified by the aid of the president or by the president himself makes this president for him a very interesting gentleman. Also, it's very interesting to know his idea that the best thing in life is to read books, and the best thing is to enjoy that. And he said that all his life, when he was a kid, his parents would give them gifts, books, in the Christmas time. And this is what he did to his children. And therefore his children and his grandchildren became avid readers. And that's why he is offering this advice to the parents of the 21st century. He's also offering them the advice that they should read, and he's offering them a list of books to be read through their lifetimes. Well, I think this book deserves to be read because it sheds the light on one of the most important historians in the history of the United States of America, and telling a lot of stories that mix and match with the history of the world. And that's why it's important to read and to understand how this man was brought up and how he worked very hard to emphasize his role in life as a historian by telling stories that makes his prose very acceptable to the whole world of readers. So I think this will sort it out. And by this we come to the end of our program today, which was the World of Info, FM 95.4. My name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. Dua Muhammad was at the control. We were coming from Studio 3 and hope that we promise that we'll come back at the same time, same station next week. Stay tuned always to Radio Cairo.